Mr. Nunley, does the state acknowledge the jury?
We do, Your Honor.
Ms. Simmons, defense. Mr. Nelson. All right, members of the jury, in just a moment, we are going to take our lunch recess. Let me give you the latest information that I have. My understanding is that the elevators are operating. My understanding is that not all of them are operating, so there may be elevator delays. My understanding is also there may be delays in you being able to come back to the courthouse based on things that are being done following up after the power has been restored for a variety of reasons. So we're going to go into lunch recess. I'm asking you to return at 3 p.m. this afternoon. It's a little after 1:30. Again, please be patient with the delays exiting the building. Please be patient with any delays you may experience coming back into the building. That's all the information that I have, is just to give you a heads up that expect delays because of a variety of reasons, including but not limited to my understanding that not all the elevators are working properly. During the recess, you're going to leave your notepads and your pens here. During the recess, you're under all the court's instructions, including but not limited to the instruction not to discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. I thank you for your service here this morning and your understanding and your patience with all of these unforeseen issues that we've been experiencing today. Just once again, I thank you sincerely for your service in this case. So enjoy your lunch, and we will see you at 3 p.m. hopefully. All right, can counsel please approach? Dr. Stephany, you're excused during the lunch recess until 3 p.m. during the lunch recess because you're in the midst of testimony. No discussions of any kind with the state or the defense. I'm not trying to make you a pariah, doctor, but you just since you're in the midst of testimony. Okay? All right, we'll see you at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for your patience during the technical issues as well. 2017 CF 15684, State v. Nelson, back from our lunch recess. Mr. Nunley, is the state ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
Ms. Simmons, defense.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nelson, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's bring the jury, please. Good afternoon, members of the jury. Mr. Nunley, does the state acknowledge the jury?
We do, Your Honor.
Ms. Simmons, defense.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nelson? All right, Mr. Nunley, please continue.
Good afternoon again, Dr. Stephany.
Good afternoon.
Let's just kind of recap just a bit, since we've been broken up some with your testimony. What is your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, about Jennifer Fulford's cause of death?
The cause of death is stab wounds and asphyxia.
And the stab wounds, I believe, that you testified to were inflicted prior to death.
Correct.
Now, approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Doctor, I'm showing you what is marked for identification as State's Exhibit U and has previously been shown to the defense counsel. Take a look at this evidence package and tell us if you recognize it, sir.
I don't recognize the outside of the packaging, no.
Go ahead and use the scissors and open it up. It may be a biohazard. I don't know if you'll use gloves or not, Doctor.
Yeah, I recognize the inner packaging.
What is State's Exhibit U for identification?
It's packaged by our office, one zip tie.
And is it in the same? Where did that zip tie come from, sir?
The wrists?
Was it collected by you, sir?
Yes.
Is it in the same condition as it was when you collected it?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, we would offer State's Exhibit U for identification. When you have it as the next substantive number.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nunley, did you say Q or U?
U as in uniform, Doctor.
Thank
Sir.
you. All right, without objection, what's been marked for identification as State's U is admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 58.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
It needs to be brought to Madam Clerk to label, and then yes.
Dr. Stephany, would you show State's Exhibit 58 and have it to the jury? I noticed the zip tie is cut, Doctor. Is that cut by you to remove it from Mrs. Fuller's wrist?
Yes.
Doctor, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty about the manner of Jennifer Fulford's death?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Homicide?
No further questions.
Ms. Simmons, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, you stated that the cause of death was asphyxiation and stab wounds,
Correct.
but you can't say that asphyxiation was her actual cause of death?
I can't say that there's findings you see on autopsy alone for asphyxia.
Okay, and so you're basing that opinion just on the fact that her nose and mouth were covered by the duct tape?
Correct.
And you can't say whether that duct tape was placed there before or after her death?
Based on the autopsy alone, no.
I'm sorry?
Based on the autopsy alone, no.
Okay. And you mentioned that the stab wounds were pre-mortem. That means before she died?
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned that 3 or 4 of the stab wounds would have been fatal on their own?
Yes.
So I want to talk about, there were 2 that were to the heart.
One was to the heart and one was to the pulmonary artery.
Okay. And the one that was to the pulmonary artery could have caused death on its own.
Correct.
And then the other one that was to the pericardial sac and the heart could have caused death on its own.
Yes.
And that second one could have led to an instantaneous death if it upset the electrical activity of the heart?
Yes, if you strike the heart, and the heart is a conductive muscle, conductive electrical pulses, which makes it beat. So there's 2 possibilities. One is you can strike the heart with a sharp object and bleed out. Another, if you strike the heart and interrupt the electrical conduction, you may cause instant death.
Okay. And then there was a stab wound that penetrated the lung.
Yes.
But you can't estimate how long someone could live with a pneumothorax or with that wound itself?
Not with any great accuracy, no.
Okay. You mentioned that there was a stab wound that punctured the liver,
Yes.
and that also could have been fatal?
Yes.
But you don't know the order of these injuries?
Correct.
Okay. And it's your opinion that these injuries were consistent with a sharp object like a knife,
Yes.
but you weren't given anything to compare to, is that right?
That's correct.
And there was no evidence that this knife was serrated, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when you look at the stab wounds, there's no evidence, let me reword this. None of the stab wounds that you looked at showed any twisting or turning. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so they would have been straight in and out.
Yes.
And you cannot say whether Ms. Fulford was standing, sitting, laying down when these injuries occurred?
That's correct.
Now, there was no evidence of sexual trauma in this case, correct?
Not based on autopsy, no.
Okay. And you did a sexual assault kit where you would take swabs for testing?
Yes.
And you did not see any evidence of injury to Ms. Fulford's head other than the evidence from the duct tape, but no bruising or contusions or skull fractures or anything like that?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're not able to estimate a time of death in this case?
Not with any great accuracy, no.
Okay. So you can't tell how long she had been deceased at that point?
Other than putting it between a window of hours to days, no.
And you're not able to say how long someone would be conscious with these types of injuries?
Be more specific about the injuries, the stab wounds.
Yes.
It would depend how fast she bled out from those injuries.
Okay. But in this case, you're not able to say with any medical certainty whether she was conscious or how long she was conscious?
After the stab wounds?
Yes.
Not with that great certainty, no. Probably, it could be minutes, it could be more than a couple minutes.
And that's in a scenario where she's bleeding out to death?
Yes.
Okay, but in the instantaneous death scenario that we talked about earlier, that would be different?
Yeah, it would be almost instantaneous if it affected the conduction system of the heart.
Okay. And in this case, you're not able to say with any medical certainty whether Ms. Fulford was conscious while this was happening or not?
No.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect?
Very, very brief. Doctor, are there certain findings that you cannot make because of the decomposition of Mrs. Fulford's body?
Yes.
And you were asked about whether or not there were, you could tell if the stab wounds were inflicted by a serrated knife. Is that one of the findings that you cannot make because of the level of decomposition?
It's possible that would be one of the findings I would miss.
Okay. Well, you not miss, just can't make.
Well, by miss, I mean because of the decomposition, we won't see it.
And let me ask you the same question about the time of Mrs. Fulford's death. Is the ability to estimate with any sort of reliability the time of Mrs. Fulford's death affected by the state of the decomposition of her body?
Well, the decomposition itself is part of the reason, is one of the indices we use to help determine time of death or since death. The fact that you saw in the pictures there was skin sloughing, discoloration, and bloating, we know clearly she wasn't instantly dead to where she was found. It would probably be several hours to maybe a day.
No further questions. Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor, you can step down.
Thank you.
Mr. Nunley, please call the next witness for the, or Ms. Hicks, please call the next witness for the state.
Thank you. The state calls Eddie Burgos.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Sir, please state and spell your first and last name for Madam Court Reporter.
Eddie Burgos, that's Eddie, Burgos, Burgos.
Thank you. Ms. Hicks.
Just one moment, Judge. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please tell us how you are employed?
I'm a bus operator for Lynx.
Okay, and if you could just maybe speak up a little bit, make sure everybody in the courtroom can hear you, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been a bus driver with Lynx?
Been going on 19 years.
In years, okay? And were you working in the capacity of a bus driver for Lynx on September 27th of 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to switch. I can use that other clicker. Okay. What's that? He just needs to turn the equipment on your,
Oh, sure.
thanks. All right. Now, when you go to work, do you just drive one bus route, or are you certified to drive multiple bus routes?
We're certified to drive multiple bus routes.
And how many different routes are you certified to drive?
Normally 4 a day if they allow it,
Okay.
or different routes a day.
So were you, do you recall what route, or now, we've heard testimony earlier, Lynx, the Lynx bus system, sometimes they refer to them as routes, sometimes they refer to them as lines, sometimes they're referred to as links, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right, so whichever word we all use, we know what we're talking about. Which route were you working on September 27th of 2017?
I was working the 107 route and also the 102 route.
All right, so you worked 2 different routes that day?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right, so I want to talk to you specifically about the 102 route. I'm going to show you, may I approach your honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 42, which is a bus transaction detail. And flipping to the 3rd page here, we see that on 9/27, we see Route 102, correct?
That's correct.
So you would have been the driver of this bus route 102 on 9/27, 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, can you tell us generally about kind of where Route 102 goes?
It starts from downtown bus station, follow through routes, go down Orange Avenue, Fairbanks, and pretty much finish off at the highlight, which is Oxford and Fernwood.
Okay. And are you familiar with the route maps?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Yes.
So I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit B as in boy, Y. You could take a look. It's a 2-page document. You recognize this document?
Yes, ma'am.
And you
So
know the
Route
second page as
102.
well? Do
Yes,
you
sir.
recognize, try to do it down low without showing pictures. Do you recognize the first page to be a map of Route 102 or line 102?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recognize the second page to be the timetable, the time schedule for that bus route?
I do recognize it, ma'am.
And is this map and this time schedule, was that in effect on September 27th of 2017?
Yes, it was, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, the state would move what has previously been marked for identification as State's Exhibit BY.
Without objection, what's been marked for identification as BY is admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 59.
Thank you. All right, so we'll take a quick look. Now, is it fair to say that this bus, 102, has an outgoing route and then an incoming route?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right, and so when we talk about the outgoing route, we would be starting at number 1 at Links Central Station, and it would go out to the end of the route, the end of the line at number 4, you're right?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. So, and then there's an inbound, but I want to talk to you about the outbound, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And obviously, is it correct to say that the numbers on the second page where it says 1, 2, 3, 4 correlate to the numbers on the first page of the map?
Yes, it does, ma'am.
All right. And are the times that are on the time schedule, are those the times that you are supposed to be at that location at that time?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. So number 1 being the starting point, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the Link Central Station located right across Orange Ave from the courthouse here?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Now, looking back at the bus pass, are you familiar when somebody comes onto the bus, do they have to swipe their bus pass in order to get access onto the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
And this bus pass at 102, it was 4 o'clock, correct?
Yes, that's correct, ma'am.
Hold on, can you zoom? I can't see what you're pointing at.
There? Get now
Yes.
where it says Route 102, it says 1600.
I'm going to sustain the objection of the form, but if you could rephrase now that I can see the.
Can you tell us what time 1600 is?
4 o'clock, ma'am.
Thank you. Was there a bus, and if you need to look at this more closely, we can do that. Was there a bus that was scheduled on the 102 route? Was there a bus that was scheduled to leave the Links Central Station at 4 o'clock?
Yes, ma'am.
And if we look down here, would that be it right there?
That's correct, ma'am.
Yep. Now, to be fair, do you have any recollection of actually driving that bus that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, did anything eventful happen to you?
No, ma'am.
All right. Was it just sort of another day driving the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right. And you've kind of been made to think about it by people coming and talking to you about it?
That's correct.
All right. Prior to coming into court today, did I show you some videos?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, are there videos on, video cameras, recording cameras on your bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
About how many cameras are on your bus?
8 cameras.
So, may I approach, Judge?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibit B as in boy X. Do you recognize this disc?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, now this one has your initials on it, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
And it has the word full on it.
Yes, ma'am.
And prior to coming into court today, did you watch this video?
Yes, I did, ma'am.
And after watching it, did you put your initials on it?
Yes, I did, ma'am.
And does this video show you and the bus route that you took on September 27th of 2017
That's correct, ma'am.
on line 102?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right. I'm also going to show you what's been marked for identification as BW. And this also has your initials on it, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Did you watch this video prior to coming into court today?
Yes, I did, ma'am.
Now, this first video, BX, that had a bunch of different camera angles on it, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
And it's fairly long. I think it's like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours long.
That's correct, ma'am.
All right. And the second video, BW, did that have just 2 camera angles on it?
That's correct, ma'am.
And was it significantly shorter?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Are the videos that are on this second disc on BW, are they the same videos that are on BX, only shorter versions?
Shorter version, yes, ma'am.
At this time, the state would move what has previously been marked for identification as BX and BW into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Without objection, what's been marked as States BX is admitted into evidence as State Exhibit 60. Without objection, what's been marked as States BW is admitted into evidence as States Exhibit 61.
So, sir, I want to start with what's been entered into evidence as States Exhibit 60.
Oh. Yeah. All right, thank you.
You recognize this as you driving the bus that day?
That's correct, ma'am.
Now, it's hard to see, but is that you in the kind of darkened one in the center on the left?
That is me, ma'am.
All right, and these are all the different camera angles that we can see on your bus that day?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right, switch discs, please. I'm now going to play what has been entered into evidence as States Exhibit 61. Please pause it right there. Sir, you see the video on the left-hand side there?
Yes, I do, ma'am.
And you see the gentleman entering the bus.
That's correct, ma'am.
Where is this location? Where is that man getting on the bus?
Downtown bus station.
Okay? Just do a quick switch over to the other. So that would be here at number 1, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Thank you. And if we can play, please. Now, sir, this video is 27 minutes and 52 seconds long. If we were to sit here and watch this for 27 minutes and 52 seconds, would you agree that we would be watching exactly what we're watching here, just people riding the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
All right. So if I could ask to please fast forward or go to timestamp 26:30, and if we could please have the audio turned up.
We are now approaching
it sounded like an automated voice that said, "We are approaching Winter Park, Sunrail, Winter Park, Amtrak." Is that, that's not your voice, right?
No, ma'am.
It's an automated voice on the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
How does that work?
It's a system that's recorded on the route. When you reach a certain area, it would set itself off and for the passengers to identify where area they're in.
And is it accurate?
It's very accurate, ma'am.
So in that situation, when we hear the voice on the bus say, "We are approaching that location," was that in fact the location you were approaching?
That's correct, ma'am.
And when we see the person with the blue sneakers and the hat get off the bus, where does he actually get off the bus?
He was getting off at the corner of New England and New York Avenue.
And is that in the vicinity of the Winter Park Sunrail/Amtrak train station?
That's correct, ma'am.
And just very quickly on this map here, going back to State's Exhibit 59. He approached to fix the thing.
Yes.
Thank you. So going back to the map now, there's spots that are marked as 1, 2, 3, 4, but are there other bus stops along the route?
That's correct, ma'am.
And is there a bus stop here where it says the Winter Park Sunrail Station?
Yes, ma'am.
And would that be where the person that we just saw in that video got off the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
May I approach you?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit B, as in boy Z. You recognize this map as an area that you're familiar with and that you drive a bus on?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. And is this map, based on what you're looking at, does this map appear to fairly and accurately depict this area of Winter Park that we're talking about?
It's very accurate, ma'am.
Thank you. Judge, at this time, the state will read what has previously been marked for identification as State's Exhibit B, Z into evidence.
Without objection, what's been marked for identification as States BZ is admitted into evidence as States Exhibit 62.
And so I believe you testified that the person got off the bus at the corner of New England and New York, is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
And there's a spot here on this map, you recognize that spot there?
Yes, I do, ma'am.
Is that where he got off the bus?
That's correct, ma'am.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Cross-examination? No, Your Honor. Sir, you can step down.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hicks, please call the next witness for the state.
Yes, the state calls Brian Smith.
Thank you.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Sir, please state and spell your first and last name for Madam Clerk report.
Brian Smith, BRIAN SMITH.
Thank you. Ms. Hicks.
sir.
Morning.
How are you employed?
I work for Boost Cobblestones Paving.
All right. How employed back in September of 2017?
I worked for the city of Winter Park.
All right. And what did you do for the city of Winter Park?
I was a facilities coordinator.
What did that mean?
Our buildings are managed by us and they were maintained by us, and I coordinated any subcontractors that came through our buildings, pest control, additional air conditioning companies, things like that.
Would one of those buildings include the Winter Park train station?
Yes, ma'am.
And that train station, does it house both Sunrail and Amtrak?
Yes.
Is there a surveillance system at that train station?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please tell us how many, well, before I get there, were you one of the people who maintained that surveillance system?
Yes.
And were you one of the people that had access to the videos that were created by that surveillance system? All right. So can you please tell us how many cameras there were at the Winter Park train station?
There were approximately 7 cameras.
Were some of those cameras inside?
Yes.
And were some of those cameras outside? And did you maintain both the ones that were inside and the ones that were outside?
Yes.
The cameras that we're talking about, both inside and outside, do they record continuously or are they somehow motion detected?
Continuous recording.
All right. And when they are recording, they're recording what's happening live in front of them? Live underneath them? They're just
Yes.
recording what's happening in the room, correct? All right. And how, at that time, how was the things that are being recorded, what are they being stored on? Some sort of storage device?
DVR device.
DVR. Where was that DVR device located?
In a secure closet in the back side of the building.
At the train station? Who had access to that secure closet?
Maybe 4 people.
And were you one of those people?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you at some point asked by representatives from law enforcement to go through surveillance images or surveillance cameras from September 27th of 2017 at the Winter Park train station?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to locate video of interest to law enforcement? And were you able to download the video and provide it to law enforcement?
Yes.
And did you view that video before providing it to law enforcement?
Yes.
And before coming into court today, did you watch a video?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Show defense counsel what has been previously marked by identification as State's Exhibit CF. You recognize this disc?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you watch this disc?
Yes, ma'am.
After watching it, did you place your initials on the disc?
Yes, ma'am.
And you see your initials there?
Yes, ma'am.
By placing your initials on the disc, were you indicating that the video that is on this disc is the same video that you provided to law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the video on this disc that is from the Winter Park train station, was that video from September 27th of 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, the state would move what has previously been marked for identification as states, oh, actually, not quite yet, sir. I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination?
No questions.
All right. Sir, you can step down.
Judge, at this time, the state would call Kai Sullivan.
Thank you.
So, for the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Sir, please state and spell your first and last name for Mountain Court Reporter.
Yes, sir. I'm Detective Kai. It's K-I-I Sullivan with the Amtrak Police.
Thank you. 6.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell us how you are employed?
I am a detective with the Amtrak Police.
Okay, I gotta say, I didn't know that Amtrak had their own police force. So if you could tell us, are you a federal employee? How does that work?
We're quasi-federal, where our authority comes from Congress, but we enforce state and local laws.
Okay, so you're the cop on a train?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay, all right. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been with Amtrak Police since 2009, September 27th, 2009, in patrol and then sergeant, and as of January 1st, 2016, detective here in Florida.
All right, and what is the area that you cover? What's your jurisdiction?
I cover all of Florida and all of Georgia.
Okay. Now, I want to show you what has been marked for identification. Hey, Pro Tem?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit Q. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recognize that item?
Yes, this is an Amtrak ticket.
It's an Amtrak ticket, okay? And is there something that you can tell us? Can you tell us how this Amtrak ticket was purchased based solely on what it looks like?
Yep, these tickets you have to get from a ticket counter.
So a ticket of that nature, it can't be printed online?
No,
And it can't be bought from like a machine?
only in DC and New York, up on the north, but not down here. Nothing south of DC.
Okay, so down here in Florida, that ticket that you have there in your hand had to have been purchased at an Amtrak ticket counter,
Yes, ma'am.
meaning in person?
Correct.
All right. Can you tell us by looking at that ticket when that ticket was purchased?
Yes, on September 27, 2017, and the timestamp is 4:52 in the afternoon.
So 4:52 p.m. on September 27th of 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us the passenger's name that appears on that ticket?
Yes, it's Scott Nelson.
Now, in order to purchase a ticket, and that has somebody's name on it, does the person who is purchasing the ticket have to provide an identification card?
Yes, a name and a government ID.
Government ID, okay? So, and is it the responsibility of the cashier who is selling the ticket to confirm that the person who's in the picture on the ID matches the person that is standing in front of them?
Correct.
I'll overrule the objection to that question.
So is it the responsibility of the cashier to confirm that the person that's in the government ID photo is the person who's purchasing the ticket?
Correct.
And then the name on the ID goes on to the ticket?
Correct.
Can you tell us what the travel itinerary was for this Amtrak train ride?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. It was on Train 92 from Winter Park, Florida to Jacksonville, Florida.
And what time was that train scheduled to depart?
It was scheduled at 7:49 p.m.
Now, did something happen that day on the train tracks here in Orlando?
Yes, there was a double homicide in front of the trains in Winter Park.
All right,
Or not a homicide, a suicide.
suicide, thank you, okay. So did that delay that train?
Roughly about 3 hours.
Okay, so the train departed the Winter Park train station about 3 hours late?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, as part of your role as a detective with the Amtrak Police Department, are you involved in the collection of surveillance footage?
Yes, ma'am.
And with respect to, can you tell us where this, it started in Winter Park. Can you tell us where it ended?
The train ended in Jacksonville,
And can you tell us the address where it ended in Jacksonville?
3570 Clifford Lane.
And prior to were you requested by law enforcement back in 2017 to look at video at that train station that you just described for us in Jacksonville?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you given a person of interest to look for in the video from that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, that train would have actually arrived, you said, how long is that train ride, do you know?
Not off the top of my head. I think it arrived somewhere around 1:40, 1:50 a.m. in the morning.
Okay, so that would have been on the morning of September 28th?
Correct.
And were you able to locate surveillance images of interest to law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the members of the jury, there are surveillance cameras in the Jacksonville train station?
Yes, ma'am. There's multiple cameras inside the station and outside the station. It's specific to that station, and it's proprietary only at that station. The DVR is right there inside the station.
Okay, and you're familiar with how these cameras capture their images?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they capturing them 24/7, or is it motion detected?
We have some on the outside that are motion detective. Everything on the inside is 24/7.
Is it a little bit of an old security system, though?
Very old security system.
All right, so does it sometimes, do the images sometimes what we call lag? Sometimes they don't appear to be moving smoothly?
The recording time is done per second, so it's like one time per 4 seconds or 3 seconds.
All right. And the security cameras that are in the Jacksonville train station, what do they record onto? What sort of recording
A
device?
DVR.
And where is that DVR located?
That DVR is located in the district manager's office.
And how many people have access to that?
The district manager, myself, and the lead ticket agent there.
All right. And were you the one who actually went onto the system and retrieved the video?
Yes, ma'am.
And the video is actually time-stamped?
Yes, ma'am.
And the timestamp on the video is accurate?
Correct.
Right. And prior to coming into court today, you provided the images to law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
And prior to coming into court today, you looked at a disc for me?
Correct.
And I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as CF. You recognize this disc?
Yes, ma'am. My initials are right there.
And you put your initials on there after watching this?
Yes, ma'am.
And does the portion of the video on this disc that is in the Jacksonville train station, is that the same video that you provided to law enforcement from the security cameras there in Jacksonville?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Judge, at this time, the state would move what has previously been marked for identification as CF into evidence.
Defense? All right, without objection, what's been marked for identification as CF, submitted in evidence as State's Exhibit 63.
And Judge, at this time, the state would also move what has previously been marked for identification as State's Exhibit Q into evidence.
Ms. Simmons? Without objection, what's been marked as State's Q is admitted in evidence as State's Exhibit 64.
So this is the train ticket that we've been talking about during your testimony here?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is on this disc that's now been entered into State's Exhibit 63? Is this the beginning and end of the train ride that's indicative of this train ticket?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, this video is 12 minutes and 7 seconds long, and the state intends to publish the entirety of the video to the jury.
Okay.
Just pause for 1 second. Now, sir, because your area is Florida and Georgia, are you familiar with all the various train stations that Amtrak utilizes?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you ever been to the Amtrak train station in Winter Park, Florida?
Many times.
Do you recognize this, you're now looking at the video in State's Exhibit 63, do you recognize this place?
Yes, ma'am. It's outside of the Winter Park station.
As this is playing, when you watched this video, did you recognize these are a bunch of different clips that have all been edited together?
Yes, ma'am.
this as the interior of the Winter Park train station that services Amtrak?
Yes, ma'am, it's the Amtrak seating area and ticket counter.
Okay, and the area over there to the right in the video, is that where somebody would go to purchase a train ticket?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, do you recognize that as the seating area there in the Winter Park train station?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, is that the outside of the Winter Park train station?
Yes, ma'am, on the parking lot side.
If we could please pause the video there. Judge, at this time, the state would move what has previously been marked for identification as State's Exhibit CG into evidence as the number 65, I believe, by stipulation of the parties.
Ms. Simmons? All right. What's been marked as CG for identification has been in evidence as State's Exhibit 65.
The state would request that Your Honor read the stipulation to the jury.
Members of the jury, stipulation, the Assistant State Attorney Kelly Hicks and Defendant Scott Edward Nelson, as well as his lawyer Robert Lahr, stipulate that State Exhibit 65 contains a surveillance video from September 27, 2017 from the 7-Eleven store located at 101 West Fairbanks Avenue, Winter Park, Florida.
This time I'm going to switch discs and publish State's Exhibit 65. Now switch back to State's Exhibit 63 at the timestamp where we left off. Sir, do you now recognize this as the train station in Jacksonville that you told us about previously?
Yes, ma'am.
And the timestamp up top there, 1:37 a.m. on September 28th, that's accurate?
Correct.
Would this be another portion of that same train station, Jacksonville?
Yes, ma'am.
Cross-examination? No questions. Detective, you can step down. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, we're going to take a brief recess. During the recess, you're going to leave your notepads and your pens here. During the recess, you're under all the court's instructions, including but not limited to the instruction not to discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please follow the deputy in the jury room. We'll bring you back as quickly as we can. Thank you. All right, we'll be in a brief recess.